Alrighty. We should be able to get rolling. Find out whether I'm getting video. Looks like I am. Welcome to the Monday stream. And I am here to do some coding on stuff, bring you up to speed with the things that are going on, such as they is. And as always, fuss with the controls for a while, getting everything ready. You know, I have ambitions of the way that I'm getting the camera to work right and not be all magenta this time. And you can see that it's working right because you can see that I have the synthesizer behind me. And even though I am all in green, it is actually in colors, because this is a color broadcast, and that's half the fun of it. It is the going into the matrix coding stream, so everything is tinted green. But other lights also work too. And the way I was able to get that to work was going to a Blackmagic ATEM video switcher that I had. It's the same thing I was doing the music streams with. And the deal with that is I began using it and did my usual video on filming on Saturday for posting on Sunday, that kind of thing. Only to discover that all of a sudden I was recording Blackmagic B-RAW footage and it wouldn't let me record ProRes anymore, which is what Final Cut understands. So I ended up having this enormous file, and it was a very nice high quality file, but the trouble is it wouldn't load into Final Cut. So I had to get this software, a B-RAW importing system, and I went and got it. It's the kind that cost $80, and it didn't work, but it worked well enough that I could learn what I was doing and transcode stuff over to another ProRes file. And I loaded that up, and that is what you saw. What you saw in the video was me using these cameras, and one of the cameras was recording in B-RAW and the other one was recording in ProRes, and I got them to work about the same. It took hours and hours above what I would normally do because everything was just fighting me every step of the way, and I got through it, and I posted K-Plate D. And my hope is that people enjoy K-Plate D. But what I'm here to do today is, where do we go from there? And the thing I'm posting next week, and I say this to the the viewer numbers are bouncing around wildly for some reason. That's okay, that's kind of how this rolls. I don't think YouTube hates me more when I put on streams and nobody comes. I have another thing to post next week. Remember that super loudinator thing? I might actually be able to demonstrate it. Let's take a sound like drums or something. So I made a plugin that I'm going to, hey oldie, well thank you, but we're going beyond that too. But here is a drum sound. And the thing I'm going to post next week, because somebody commented on it and was looking for it, is as follows. You're going to get Airwindows Huge This is not out yet, but when it is, you'll be able to do this. Because it's kind of a loudinator, and the way that it works and the nasty control kind of doesn't really do anything, but that's fine. Maybe I need to work on that some more before I actually post it. That is happening this coming week. Or not, I'm not sure. This is the one that, oh yeah, no, that's me playing. I play all of these things. I don't think I play any of them well enough to like get a job doing that as a thing, but yeah, I do all of that stuff. It's not my best playing of drums either, but it manages. So that is a loudination. Don't mind me messing with the controls a little bit. It looks kind of like this. So you can see it's being made much louder. And if we bypass, that's what it started as. So there's the deal with that. Is what do you think of it? I wonder whether I can. Yeah. Don't mind me. I'm just looking at all of the mechanics of everything going on here. Yeah, I do a lot of interesting things with drums. One of the things that I have learned to do is set up the drums in such a way that I get the kinds of sounds I want out of them. Because it's a sort of off 70s kind of sound that I'm getting there. And I don't know if, I think I was doing this by On Into the Night, which is where those drum tracks came from. But the way that works is I had to set up the drums kind of special to get them to do what I wanted. So I'm using tricks from several different places. One of them is the classic John Bonham trick, where what you do is you line the drums with aluminum foil. And I've heard it said like, oh, he lined the drums with aluminum foil, and it may be apocryphal, it may not actually have happened, to make them go off like cannons, in the belief that lining the drums with aluminum foil would do that, would make them go kaboom, which is not really quite what happens. But I think you can hear what happens on a bunch of Led Zeppelin tracks nevertheless. If you line your drums with aluminum foil, like put some double-side tape in there, then put the foil in, what that does is it damps them. It damps lower frequency sounds more than sort of higher frequency resonances, because lower frequency sounds are strong enough to move and displace the aluminum foil, and that physically moves them and alters them, which causes energy to be dissipated in heat. It's the same way that damping uses, like acoustic foam or whatever. Acoustic foam makes stuff quieter by converting vibrations in the air into motions and compressions and expansions of foam, which is somewhat flexible. And the foam moving is not perfectly springy. If it was, it wouldn't damp sound. So what it does is it generates heat by being moved by the air. Also, if air goes through a small cavity, like bass traps work like this, if you send compressed air through a small aperture, It'll increase the speed of the air going through the aperture, but then that will also increase the heat, so that dissipates energy too. And this conversion of vibrations into energy is how damping happens. So you can do that with aluminum foil. The trick is, if you just put some aluminum foil next to you, that's not going to absorb sound at all, because you're not making a loud enough sound to physically bend it. However, if you were John Bonham and you put it inside your drums, you're hitting the drums hard enough that you're displacing the foil. There is no question about it. You could build a microphone element into a hole cut in the shell of a drum and then instantly destroy the element with one drum hit. It would absolutely, the amount of force that you apply that way is extremely high. And so that's how that works. And another thing that I do with the drums is I put them on a slab of plywood that is sitting on bricks on my floor. It's a drum riser. And the reason for that is the noises that you make with playing on the drums or whatever send sort of thunderous vibrations through the floor, and the floor needs to resonate in order to increase the amount of sound that the drums are putting out. So essentially, all of these things are ways in which you're making the sound less rather than making it more. And if it sounds more like cannons going off, it's because you played them like that. But for instance, in the guitar solo on Stairway to Heaven, classic Led Zeppelin track there, and it is like 2023, so I'm not sure whether people have necessarily heard that, but I grew up hearing it because I'm old. And there is the place in the solo where the guitar is about to go do 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 do, and Bonham famously is doing his drum thing, and he does a fill that's like, and in doing that, his tom-toms are the loudest thing in the entire track. They just blow out the whole track, but they die away very quickly. The sound that they're making, although they're extremely loud and intense, is also a sound that cuts off quicker than you would think. And there are a number of reasons for that. One of them is he's tuning the drums not super high. They're not like timbales. Technically, what he was doing was the lower heads were being tuned higher than the top heads, and the top heads were, it's like a sort of jazz tuning, honestly. So if he had played them really mellow, and you hear that on like Moby Dick or whatever, you can hear that there's the resonant heads and they're ringing out. But then if you saw how he played and saw a video of him, you would see this tiny dot in the exact center of the head, which is where he beat the crap out of them and wore out the head right there. And that's from just ruthless battering of the drum to the point where it's being hit so hard that it is no longer ringing out. And that's part of how that sound is made. The sound of that drum fill that has such projecting pronounced toms that then go away again, that's not really being done like studio trickery. You hear it and you go like, oh wow, nice noise gates. You've just hit the drums and they make their sound and then they stop. Wow, nice noise gates, John Bonham. And that's not how it works. Instead, he's got it set up so that the actual sound of the drums is cutting off in that way. And that's because the initial sound is extremely loud. He may have had aluminum foil in there because Led Zeppelin 4, they were pulling out all the stops and trying to recover from what was a medium giant hit from Led Zeppelin 3, where some of the songs were mellower than others, and it wasn't just a reissue of 2. And so with 4, they were trying to sort of reconquer the world again and going really heavy or going combinations of really heavy and mellow, and did a great job of it. So he could very well have been using not only drums tuned as well as he'd learned to tune them, but also some of the old tricks like, oh, I used to put aluminum foil in the drums to make them go off like cannons, they say. And that's the result you'd get. So when I set up drums and things like that, I'm trying to learn from those things. It's all about getting the original sounds to come out properly. But yeah, we're not only here to deal with talking about John Bonham and drums. It's just because I had been playing them and people are asking questions. And I'm pretty good at answering questions for people if they want me to answer questions for them. But we've got something else to do. And I'm going to show you this. While I copy these things over to the computer where I do this work. And we're going to get into more of that later. Because, yeah, some of this, I can do some of this stuff on my own, and that's fine. But when I'm doing live streaming, I would like to answer people's questions and talk too, but I'm also doing the actual work that gives you the new things. Check this out. What might this be? And I'm not running the audio. You're hearing it over my speakers, and that's fine. We're not that worried about that. But that's literally the sound of the Abbey Road chamber, or at least the version of it that Rick Beato wandered into, because that's from the Rick Beato video, edited. And it's capturing that moment when he went into the real live Abbey Road chamber and went, oh my God, I'm in the chamber. And did that. So what we've got here is both the clip of what it sounded like for him to do that, and the decay will be slightly longer because he did that with two people standing in the chamber. If two people are standing in the chamber, it's not going to sound the same as if it is empty. So we can expect that the end goal is going to be a little bit longer and a little bit brighter, but not by a huge, huge quantity. And this bit in the beginning here, what's this? If we zoom in on it, as we are allowing the stream to do, we can see that that is a clap. Although, you know, it can also be a bass. That's not even a bass. Let's see, how do we make this be a bass? It's a clap, but we can make it be a bass just by looping it that quick. Where do we get that? From this. This is the clap into that reverb. And this initial part is the sound of the clap. Hey, Lorenzo. The sound of the clap before it's bounced off of any walls or bounced off of anything. So almost immediately, we've got bits of noise that are early reflections in the sounds of that chamber echoing around. But when you do the very initial part of it, that very initial part, is just the attack of the clap, which is all the sound is it is a quick attack and it's gone. Hey, thanks to Lorenzo. Today and probably next week we're working on a chamber, and the chamber that we're working on is not unlike a particular chamber that lives in Abbey Road. I don't have a hand clap from inside Abbey Road back when it was being used by the Beatles. At least as far as I know, I don't. I don't have any multi-tracks from anybody who was doing that work. This is from a YouTube video from a guy who got to visit, and he on screen clapped his hands in there. That ain't all. We're not done. Because after I do the chamber, that being an interesting thing, we're going to do this. Studio B. Same video, same guy. Rick Beato went into the studio, and while talking to the guy and asking him about the Beatles, which the fellow who was giving the lecture was showing some signs of fatigue from everybody only wanting to talk about the Beatles and so on. He had continued to work with other bands, but mostly people who go and make videos and stuff are wanting to talk about, like, wow, this historic place. Paul McCartney stood right here, and that kind of stuff. But in the process of doing that, he clapped his hands a couple of times while they were inside Studio B, and this is what came out. If you ignore his igist. So you hear that. So what we can do, and if you do this kind of stuff, you can also do this, is edit all of the other noises into silence, retaining only. And that's kind of even better than the one in the chamber, although it's not the exact same sound. And if you had both of them play, source claps, dry wet, basically. This is dry wet in an acoustic space. It is Abbey Road Studio B. Very famous and very suitable studio for doing stuff in. And we should be able to bring that to a reverb as well, by virtue of this kind of thing. So thanks, Rick, for going in, thanks for making the video, first of all, but thanks for, while you are making that video, you go into the acoustic space and you can't resist yourself. You can't help it. You can't resist. You gotta go clap, because it's an acoustic space. Thank you for doing that, because when you do that, I can eventually come around and give you Audio Unit and VST plugins that are open source and free using my own software, so it's not taking anybody else's anything, tuned to the sound of the noise that you made. Again, thanks, Rick. Please go to more cool places. Go to more famous spaces and clap your hands in there. Hopefully while nobody's talking, but I can work around that too. And that's how it's done. You can see plainly on this one, check this out. We've got this. Actually, that's a bad example because he's literally talking. That is more a clap with the Studio B behind it. And what it looks like is this. This is what it looks like when you clap, and then this is the reverb. This is the amount of pre-delay between this and the first reflection. You can see there's the clap, and then there is the initial onset of the nearest place between you and the microphone. It's probably a floor bounce. I think it would be a floor bounce. And then we've got other things. Here's another wall, clearly. That's going to be a large flat surface. And very quickly it just is going to turn into the space. And if we take the clap away, this is the sound of only the reverb full wet. Or actually, no, I think we got, this is the first bit. Or not, that sounds a little bit like a, we'll cut that off, and that's what the sound of full wet Studio B, which is something that you can't actually do in real life, but I'm doing it in an editor. That's the sound of the echo of Studio B without the clap that excited it. And then if we include the clap, like that. Or if we exclude the first reflection, the little noise there is some strong early reflections coming in at particular times. If you moved around in the room, those will be coming in different places. And if we took the final one, it's almost like some kind of snare. Then we got a noise. Honestly, one of the fun things about sampling is just doing peculiar stuff like that. It's one of the reasons I'm interested in getting... That's too slow. Give me a bass made out of that noise. Still too low. Becomes a frequency. We have the vocal sound in here, but also we're looping it in such a way that we're getting a sort of tick as the loop switches over, or not. See, there's not. Let's loop it at 0. And there we made a musical note out of it. So, and that's just a noise that a guy made in the room, in the Abbey Road Studio A room. Studio B, sorry. And so that's the beginning of what we're going to be doing today, is fooling around with this and getting ready to attempt a chamber. So one of the things that we're working around here is the fact that such a chamber plugin exists. Let's, I think if I switch away from that, it's less like I'm playing somebody else's video on stream, so I'm not going to do that. But we do have these folks are trying to show off what their Reverb plugin sounds like. I think I can do better. He says, drinking more coffee. I am barely 25 minutes into stream, so I've got about an hour and a half to mess with it. And these other folks making a chamber plugin, they are doing it in such a way they've got an input control, they've got an output control. It's big, fancy, skeuomorphic stuff. We're not going to do that. My stuff doesn't use that. They've got mic position things, which I'm not going to get into. And reverb type things, which we're going to be focusing on what they're calling Chamber 2. They would have been modeling the same thing that Rick Beato was in, because they weren't around making plugins back in the days when the Beatles were working. So anytime we get into stuff like doing things that are literally coming out of classic records like Dark Side or whatever, I'm on the same footing as everybody else, because they don't have the ability to time travel either. We're all just trying to get the sound right. In this case, what these folks did is they went into these places and they recorded stuff and they measured things and they tried to get it sounding a certain way. And they also tried to mimic every bit of technology, such as this section called Steed, which is essentially a tape echo. Well, I think I can get the gist of how that stuff works by using my pre-delay algorithm, which is already present, and tone shaping that, and then having the regeneration go on that, and not necessarily actually I'm going to be needing to put some regeneration into the actual chamber part as well, but I think that's going to be a separate issue. Because the way this stuff works, they don't have the ability to adjust the decay time of the actual real life chamber. Do they have different graphics and everything? Yes, they do. We don't have the ability to zoom in on this video, but what I can do is kind of show it anywho. So what these folks are doing is drawing a lot of GUI basically, but this is a top-down picture of what the real world thing is that I have an audio clip of, and the audio clip that I have is of the real thing and not anybody's virtual imagined version of it. This is one where I won't even have to refer to anybody's product YouTube videos, because this one, thanks to Rick went in and clapped his hands in the chamber, and then I had it on audio. So what we see here in these people's product is the input and the output. There's a picture of the chamber. You're not going to get that from me. There's various mics. We're not going to be doing that. We're just going to be trying to get as realistic as possible. I'm not necessarily doing a mirror room or a stone room. If I do a stone room, it'll probably be when I finally get the Bricasti, and they will have stuff like that, and I'd rather imitate their take on that. I'm not concerned about the speakers. Again, we're going to just try to get the sound of the thing. And if I am going to, I am pretty sure that I can get a better take on what the Steed stuff works, and I'll tell you how. I'm going to record my Abbey Road vinyl record. And I'm going to reference the song Oh Darling. I'm pretty sure that this, not the plugin, but this system is what Paul McCartney used there. Because it's got that thing where you've got a chamber sound making it be big. And you've also got a tape slapback sound in there. I'm pretty sure this was it. So I'll probably end up going over to my microphone over there and recording some scratch tracks where I'm like, "Oh, darling," and belting as loud as I can, just to make sounds in the same general vicinity of how loud Paul was and how much he was shredding his larynx when he was doing it. It's not going to sound anything like, but it will be the same general class of thing. And then throwing that into with these folks, they are doing their feedback. They've got dedicated filters and stuff like that. I'm going to use different kinds of filters. I'm not that concerned about the filters to chamber either, unless they prove necessary. And I'm not that concerned with stuff like this, where, oh, actually, no, this is a dude's review.
Wall or face for now.
So this is a guy who bought the plugin and is showing it off.
We can also choose brighter.
And so that is him going through not the chamber, but the plugin. And in fact, we can contrast these things. I don't think he claps, sadly. But we have Rick on tape having clapped. So the difference between the plugin and the real thing is kind of like this.
It's the Neumann KM.
And there's this guy talking in a plugin.
53.
And this is Rick clapping his hands in the real place. And again, let's... hand clap from the real thing. And guy talking.
I don't know why it says KM53S.
From the plugin.
Maybe that's a plural. But either way, it's slightly brighter than the other microphone type.
So you can tell it's meant to be the thing. And my job is going to be starting to get the plugin ready for doing my take on that as well. Just in case anybody needs a competitor to WUP. You can have AUP. Yup. How about that? You get AUP. AUP. It's a Airwindows update program. The Airwindows update program is, yup, if I can fix anything, you can have it. It's less small print that way. So let us dive in. We're going to start at 11:33 a.m. or so this computer says. Ooh, Stancy's. Yeah. See, these are things that I should be able to do. I don't have to go really whole hog with it as long as I get the general, because the thing is, here's the deal. When you're working on this kind of stuff and you go, here is a tape machine, and here is an equalizer, and here is this, and here is that, we need to go and model all of these things in the computer. By the time you're done trying to get every detail right, the sound is dead. Dead. Half the time people doing that are doing it while running all of their internal calculations in 32-bit float because they'll calculate a little faster. And they've just chewed up the sound so badly in the digital domain that it's unrecognizable. There is no verisimilitude to it. So what you do is run as many types of tone alteration as you can that are part of the systems you're using in such a way that you're doing minimal processing to get your result, but you're aiming at that stuff. This is also why when I do my TC 1234 version of console, which is likely to be the first one because that seems like a big thing to jump into and attempt, it's going to be a version of console. It's going to have an array of controls that to some extent mimic what you got on the actual desk that Abbey Road and Darkside were done on, as in, treble, bass, mid-range. If there are mid-range setting controls and it is a switchable pot, there will be something where you're switching between those specific frequency controls. if there's distortion, because there will be, it's going to likely be the same kind that I've got on K plate A, B, and C. That's actually a somewhat purer tonally saturation than the one I'm using in D. The one I'm using in D is the density calculation. It's the use of sine and arcsine to do stuff. And that's been an effective way of me getting tube-like characteristics because it's the smoothest transition that you can have of a transfer function. Whereas the one that I'm doing for those other ones, it bends off a little bit steeper, but you don't have to do as many calculations with it. And I'm going to be digging into experimenting with this further because you got to pick the right thing for the purpose. Like in picking the ones that I used for the hybrid, it wasn't simply about having it run more efficiently, it's also running less calculations. And doing that is what gets it to be a deep enveloping sound with spatiality to it, rather than just being like, it's a block of cheese that's roughly the right color as what the original Alive thing was. And anyway, we're going to dive into this a little bit for now. First thing to do, come up with a name. And then we're going to copy stuff over from this and start tweaking with it. By the time my day is done, by the time it's 1 in the afternoon, I should have something audible and will be auditioning the sounds of chamber-sized reverb phenomena, because I've got a set of possible options for chamber-sized acoustic spaces, and we're going to dive into that. So let's see. Firstly, where it says with Cocoa View here, that technically means I'm going to be making a stereo plugin. That'll transition into being a VST more easily. And we're going to do K something. So we were doing K plate A, K plate B. So it's going to be K chamber something. Let's call it K chamber AR. That might be considered to stand for something. That's okay. When I do a console that's based on the recording console, it's going to be console TG, I'm thinking. So we'll run that way. And I have other plugins that are like chamber, because they're not meant to be anything in particular, and they're not meant to be restrictive in the ways that I'm making these. Because here's the thing about it is, if you're trying to make the sound of like your Abbey Road plate D, and you know like this is an EMT 140 and it's running through all this cable and it's running through this particular thing which is a pre-delay, so on and so forth, all of this stuff, those will all have sounds to them. It's not that hard to start encompassing some of those things, getting stuff adapted. But the temptation is always going to be, I need to give people the option between filtering it until it sounds and acts like this, or what if you wanted to filter it so that the sound went off into high frequencies like it was being excited in a room of liquid nitrogen. You know, it's the computer, you can do anything you want, but you don't want. The idea is to make some of this stuff that is like starting to work with the things that they pretend to be. And part of that is narrowing it down until the workflow is acting like the workflow of the original source. And that's easy to miss, because people don't like having stuff taken away from them. If you say, you can have this, and this is going to apply the filtering that they put in it, and you can also apply the particular controls, and we'll draw a little picture of the controls, and then let's filter it this way. But then let's also switch in. You could also choose to filter with the filter that lives in a studio in Los Angeles, because you know about that one. Oh, and let's also put in, you could also choose to filter in a way which is not necessarily like an analog device, but it's linear phase. So use modern filtering for more accuracy. Why not have that option? And that why not to have that option is because you were going after the particular like Abbey Road plate sound in the first place. If you have to audition all of those different things on each sound, first of all, you're going to wander away from the original goal. And secondly, you're going to spend all of your time trying to critically listen to whether you like this EQ better than that EQ. And by the time you've decided, you've forgotten what you were recording. So we're going to get serious with some of this stuff. And K-Chamber AR is going to be focused down on what these things are meant to do for you. So it's going to give you that sort of roomy, encompassing sound, that particular kind of rockabilly cool noise. And then you're going to have the echo, because if you remember what the Beatles song "Oh Darling" sounds like, you can plainly hear when he's making a sound and the tape echo kicks in, like, and then it's also going into a chamber, which is why it doesn't sound like just only a pure tape echo, because there's more going on there. But the slapback, this Steed system apparently had the capacity to do a rockabilly slapback, and so there it is. Clearly it was being used on some of this stuff. We're going to make it so that you can make that noise and adjust it and tailor it in various ways, but not every conceivable way. More like we're going to focus on making that noise because it was a good noise. And we're going to start by getting some of this together. So K-Chamber, K, CH for chamber. Well, it could be either CHA for chamber or CHA for AR. Either way, ka-cha is going to be the sound for that one. And that is our version number. Got to remember to do that. And then we're going to start copying over the guts of verb tests so that we can start fooling with the end result. And we do that. I'm copying over stuff that works so that I can build the new version and have it be in a working stage for me to move forward from there. This is also a good excuse for having open source software out there, is that you can do this too. You just have to credit Airwindows. You can start with something like the resulting K-Chamber. These things I'm just keeping to myself, but it's because they're not coming out as plugins. But it works the same way. It works kind of like this. We go from there. Paste into there. Oh, look, we already have some reverb spaces defined in here. We're going to be replacing these, but we might check to see that it exists. And then we grab everything from, let's say, private on down. And this is the guts, the variables that make it work. In fact, this is more variables that we need to make it work, because this encompasses both what we're going to use and also the plate versions of things. We got the filters. We got the undersampling. We have more than we'd actually use. Same deal with this, then we should be able to build and begin. So let's look up here. We had 12 options, but we only see 10 here because for this one, I had to add a couple of extra things in there to fully dial in what I do with these. And so we have to continue and add a few more parameters for this to work. Then we're copying this with all of its settings as they stand. 1 through 12. Then we have to instantiate all of the variables we defined. Make sure that they start off as 0 or as the correct number that we want. There are more elegant ways of doing that, but this is the way I'm going to choose. Goes down to FPD and starts up here. So I can just click there, paste that in, it goes down to FPD in the same way, and we're almost ready to build and do it. First time I build it, it's not going to work, but that is a quirk having to do with how this particular stuff goes. And we're going to go from overall scale on down. We've got some things commented out there. And we're just copying it down. And then likewise, but we have much less this time. And having done that, we should now have this built and ready to go. And again, when I build it, it's not going to understand the first time because it needs to build all of its library stuff, and it's getting to that after trying to build the AU source. So it needs to go through this process. Having finished this and thrown all these errors, it just went through and built the stuff in here. Public utility, AU base. These exist, but I didn't write them. They're part of the audio unit framework. And so we got this stuff in here. Here is the thing, inline int getScr, int result, ASM volatile, blah, blah, blah. So some of what this does I'm going to start doing myself, but not right at the moment. It says if target OS Mac, and this is not going to translate into the when I do the new version, signed version, this isn't necessarily the same. But this is the libraries that I'm building against for this retro version. And we're looking at some of the source code that is used. So if target OS Mac, and either it's x86 or x86-64, and that's because back then, and indeed with my stuff, you're able to build PowerPC. I'm able to build PPC stuff. So if we're building for a Mac, but it's an Intel, inline int get CSR, and that's going to mean, like, if we include this, if we say this, it's going to replace that with what's in here. And that is ASM volatile and then a line of code. This is going to be assembly language. The Apple programmers in building their libraries are doing stuff where they're doing a little bit of a shortcut. They get to write get CSR. This is the kind of stuff I'm going to learn to do. I would like to tighten up some of my code and be able to do some things that look more space saving and are less ungainly. People get really into this kind of stuff. Like, I've worked with the code for Reverb. I did not like it. I think at one point I was able to make a version of Reverb, but the problem is Reverb is consolidating things down into so many, like, if you say get CSR, what that means is what's inside these brackets, which is this, in results, ASM, volatiles, and then inside there you've got, like, if you say SMSC, CSR, what that means is this, and so you've got this layer of preprocessor directives that's like expanding stuff outwards until it's a giant pile of code that you then compile. But the guy that did Reverb was a pretty decent job of smooshing things down into these tiny little sets of classes. Do I have that? Can I show that? As long as I'm talking about it, because we're not going to finish building the chamber thing today. Here, what I'll do is I will build it again, and you can see this time we built fine. And our key chamber is here. We can close verb tests. We can go into there. We can drag it into the components. We can open up, let's say, chamber claps. And go after our recently added K-chamber AR. And it's not really meant to sound like this necessarily. This is a very unpleasant noise, but we can hear that the plugin is working. It's just not optimized to what I need. And if I was to be auditioning it, I would do this. I would go like switch bypass on and off. Obviously not accurate. And then I would adjust until I got the desired result. And obviously, we have the wrong reverb algorithm. It doesn't sound anything like it. So we're going to go and adjust that. But first, I think in my library, I might just have an example. Yeah. I tried to make this work. I do not know whether I translated it or not. Let's find out. Why have we opened this in another window? We don't seem to be opening this up properly. Well, let me have a quick glance. See whether this looks anything like... Oh, no, I don't think I actually started it. It looks very much to me like I did not actually start that. But I bet it's from here. Yep, see, this is the original. May open, may not. So we're now looking at the open source project Reverb. And this is where I will tell you my objections to this bit. Mark Poirier. Actually, no, this was written by Jezar. It's public domain. And Sophia Poirier from Destroy Effects did this. Obviously a very long time ago. And so Reverb's got, as adapted, look like this. We got this stuff going on. We have things being called that are being written as other calls. Some of this is the same. And then we've got stuff like this. That's not helpful. That's not helpful. Could it be in here? So I'm essentially trying to find things like enum, pre-delay. You have to know, and this is not the most beginner-friendly stuff, I would say. You have to know, like, oh, this is making a list of ints. 0, 1, 2, 3, or perhaps 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so it would be 0. And it's making these things be ints. K pre-delay, that becomes 0. So if you say K pre-delay, it's going to say 0. And this is going to say 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then key num params happens to be 5, which is the number of these, and that's how you relate to it. But if you didn't know that those actually turn into numbers in practice, then you get very confused. And that happened to me a lot when trying to get any sense of this stuff. We've got rev model. I'm not sure where to find what a rev model is, but it's being declared like a variable. So we're going to go and look into the Reverb code, which here's some more of the Reverb code, and we're going to try to find what that even is. Just because I started talking about it, and sure, why not? Nothing here. Yep. Reverb, again, it says model mute. I don't know where to find that. It's a little, I might search a little harder, but I couldn't find where any of the code is being done here. This is part of AU. We've got this in mine. In fact, this very person, Sophia Poirier, is who helped me get some of this started years and years and years ago. She wrote here. Let me go and find it. What was my code? So I'll show you what Sophia wrote for me. And this was before all of this was a big political contentiousness too. Sophia wrote this section. The reset section, or either it was that or it was this. See, it says, because my stuff wasn't initializing properly, and she gave me sort of magic code, like paste this in, it should work, and I pasted it in and it did work, and then my stuff initialized on all the DAWs it needed to. But before she got involved, this didn't exist in the Apple sample code. There's something in here where it didn't exist in the Apple sample code, and she gave me a little chunk of code that was also very much like sample code, and at that point it started to work. But I can't make any sense of this Reverb stuff. This was part of the Apple sample code. Process buffer lists, that's part of it as well. But model, what's model? Where is model? And so let's go find it. Well, there's various things about that. See, here's Reverb again. Could there be something in Reverb? Resources? Components. Ah, see, here we go. So here's Reverb. And this is calling on other libraries that live in completely other places. It's just being referred to. So if we go to Rev Model, here's where Rev Model lives. And this is a class. This is part of C++, this little double colon here. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know that it's part of C++. And it says COML set buffer. Well, here's your problem. This is an array. Arrays don't inherently have set buffer or comb tuning. So that goes somewhere else too. So Rev Model, we're already going somewhere else. We said comb, so let's look at comb. And here we have, that was also a class. And it has like filter store and filter skip. And these things are part of what this class has. And this class has a function, set buffer, which just says these things. Buffer buff, buff size size, prime buff size. But I don't see where those variables are anywhere else, other than I bet I can find them in the H file. See, buff size, and we've got these things, and this is what the class is about, so it's spelling out some of these things. One of them is inline, meaning that when you compile it, it will replace stuff with what lives in here. But they've been busted into these little chunks, these little pieces. All of my stuff is literally inline, so I'm glad it's crucial for speed, because yay processing speed. We've got a undernormalize. That's also something that Sophia or the original writer made. And then that's all that's in this H file. But inline means you have to put all of this stuff in before you build. And then we've got comb. The mute function does this stuff with it. Mine would probably have all of this just inline in the guts of the code. All of this is busted into little pieces of code that live in other places so much. I never was able to find out how this worked. I never was. I was never able to make any sense of it. I did not write this. This is not my comments. This would be Sophia's or the original author's. And here's an interesting thing. A switch case statement where not everything has breaks. I've talked about this before. Prime buff. So this is an interesting way of going about doing this. This is a way of quickly getting primes out of just taking any particular number. And this is how this is being done. See, I can figure this out by now. Prime buff equals buff size, and we're dividing it by 10. So it's 4 and 277. We're feeding in a number, and prime buff is going to be the thing. We're switching indexer, we're going in, we're carrying with us prime buff because we've already got that. And that's going to be what we end up wanting a prime number to be out of. And this is a really cute way of going about doing this. We're going through and we're taking each of these things, and every time we get to a place where it's like, okay, prime buff was one of these things, we got a while statement, and while we are not satisfying these conditions, we keep subtracting until we are. So it's basically a way of rapidly skipping through and getting to a prime number from any arbitrary number. I think this is adorable. This is the kind of way I code things, and the reason it's being done this way is because it's faster. It's not sophisticated, it just burns and goes. This I love. I love this. Yay, primo. And so with our comb filter, we've got that. I guess this is Jazzar. I guess that Sophia was porting it to Mac, but this guts of it is public domain, so you can use it too. Yay, open source. I could use this if I wanted. And it'll give you primes up to a particular amount. Let's see whether it does the same thing. Nope. All passes are also like a comb filter, but they're slightly different. Under normalize, sample equals. See, this is useful. This is useful. I'll be able to learn how to do some of these things because it's being done in practice with this stuff. if you want to do a define where you have something that looks like it's a function, but it's really not, you say define undernormalize sample as this. And then you've got that, and this is done with the preprocessor. This is not being done with the, when it's running through and processing everything, it's taking everywhere you say undernormalize and replacing it with this stuff as if by a search and replace. So that your eventual code is much bigger and more ungainly, and it has all of this stuff in here. That's cute. I like it. I wouldn't necessarily put it in the H file unless you absolutely have to. I would put it up where the code is so that I could have it be more visible. But it's cute to be able to do this and then just only say undernormalized sample. You could have it be like define Q sample, and then it would still do the same thing. And then in our comb filters and such, maybe not right here. I think it was the Reverb model where it does it. Does it somewhere, I know that. So we've got these different areas of code where it's constantly calling little chunks of stuff from elsewhere. Like set prime buff, we just looked at that. Room size. Set feedback, oh, we set, no, actually I don't think we did. Set prime buff actually lives down here. And they are not inlined. So when you say a set prime buff, that's actually not one of these, but some of them are. Set damp. This is down here. So you can do that. Whereas would it be up here? I'm trying to find where it says set prime buff. I'll stop this soon. I just got interested in where it was doing its stuff. And again, here is our Reverb as an AU, and this is the stuff Sophia wrote. And the init AU param, all this stuff is like that. Here's where the audio processing is done. And that's what it looks like. Everything is busted down into model process replace. Boop. So it's essentially like this. Like when we're doing this stuff the way I do it, this is part of the code. Like, you know, when you're doing a plugin, it's going to say process buffer lists and all my stuff is inside there. So we're essentially doing it like we've got this, and now rather than just do our stuff here, we're going to say model process replace because we wanted to make this all into C++ classes and do it somewhere else. And we're passing in frames to process, and we're passing in 1, in 2, which is, I suppose we could be passing in buffer and buffers m data, or maybe not. But we're passing in stuff that is very, very slightly removed from where we started, rather than doing, like we're not even doing the buffer lists from here. Model process replace inherits the in-frames to process and runs from there. And then Sophia's like, I don't know what the hell this is for. Okay, I don't know what that's for either. We are, and that's a beautiful example of nobody really understands all of this stuff. It's horrific. There's always something beyond. And here we have a ref model which instantiates by starting out making some buffers and things and starting things up. Mute makes stuff be quiet. That's being called almost immediately, and there it is right there. So in the instantiation of this reverb model, which is, that's when it says name of the class. What lives in here is just the instantiation. It's the first time it starts. It's like reset for my stuff. And then it immediately calls mute. If it didn't, your stuff would be filled with randomness. Or your buffers would be filled with randomness, rather. And weirdly, when you call mute here, it's not actually doing the muting. All it's doing is going like numcombs. So these are the number, combs are basically just a delay that you combine together to make a reverb. And then we go a call into the combs. And the combs also have a mute function. So the class had a mute function, and mute function calls another function that lives in the combs rather than just doing it here. So we go and look in there, and inside the code for comb is mute. And everything, we could have stuck this into that other code and it would all be in the same place, but it would take more space. And so some people just do not like stuff taking up space. There's a phrase that they use like, don't repeat yourself. So you should only have to write that once. I prefer to write it each time so you can see each of the things that it's doing. In practice, it winds up being the same. The computer has to do all the same stuff. It's just a question of, do you write this code for each thing so that you can see which thing was happening? I mean, this is not, you can write this like this and it'll still work because it's a for statement and there's only one statement here. So you could make a row of these and then you'd see which ones are being done. But people who are really caught up in the don't repeat yourself thing do it like this, where we started with a reverb model, and the reverb model defines a class, and then the class, I know, right? See, I'm talking through this for anybody who is interested in coding and wants to program stuff like this. These are the things that stopped me when I started going. And you've got the class, and the class is making these comb filters. Comb filters are like little delay lines. And it is actually spelling these out one after another. Comb L0, 0, 1, 1, so on and so forth. But after it's made them, it is, rather than sticking this here, so that that's there, and then taking each of these things and filling that with each of the little combs. Instead, because we could take that, there was one line of code for those. So technically what you could do is, I'm going to make sure not to save here. See where it says mute? I'll copy. And then the same thing for R. You could do this. You could just do this for the combs and this for the all passes, and that would be this. We saved like 6 lines of code by going to two separate places to do the thing. Just so that we could have this. Now that was just a copy, we didn't need to. So I replaced like 8 lines of code with this, which goes to two separate places to do its thing. Hey, good circuit. And that's why I was not able to understand Reverb. I've done things like take stuff like this that was biquads and turned it into my own style, which is more explicit. But yeah, this is how a bunch of folks program, is make things go to as many different places as possible so that you can have fewer characters for any given thing. If there were like this much code, and each of those could also be replaced by literally one line of code, and replace this much code with this much code, there are a lot of people who will do that. I just don't like it very much when they do, because it makes me upset and I don't understand what the hell is going on. Oh look, a denormalization that is not the denormalize macro. So the guts of Reverb is process replace. It's similar to process replacing in VST. We are apparently abbreviating input L and input R rather than having it be input L and input R. I don't know why. When we define these things in this way, we have not instantiated them, so these could be any number until we've told them what they are. This is where we got the in-num samples from earlier, and we're reading it as num samples because it's the same, like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's argument number 5. So where we called it in Rev model, oh no, wait. Where we called it in Reverb, this is process replace. So process replace goes into in 1, into out 1, out 2, in frames to process, which is we got that from here. This came from here. And so we're sending it to a C class called process replace, a function in there. It's the 5th argument. So instead of using in frames to process, here we call it num samples for no particular reason. We could have called it, in fact, watch this, edit all in scope. This is a thing that you can do. This will also work. I just found where it was being defined, and I said change everything in scope. And now it's using the Apple terminology for it, so it's the same word in each place, but it's going to be the same thing in each place. It's just that what we had was num samples, so it changed its name between the two places. And it's doing the same thing that we do in the regular code. And as we go, oh, interesting. Check this out. This is not sample rate friendly. If we run Reverb as it's being coded at a higher sample rate, it's going to be pitch shifted up. That's something I had to learn how to get around. And I'll tell you why. For each sample, sweep equals sweep plus 0001, this is not being scaled based on what sample rate you're using. In fact, I'm not sure they have the sample rate covered on this at all. This is just a basic Reverb model that's assuming that everything is going to be 44.1K. I can actually use this kind of stuff in my downsampling because I just wrap it in another more code. And here is where we start doing stuff. Comb L process input sweep. So when we go and find process wherever that is, see ref model, process replace. Do we have a thing? Process mix, that's different. Update. So we're not using that. So let's see, where do we find process? Oh, I know, we find it in the comb filters. So as we're doing this, sample by sample, we're calling this, and so each of these are a little delay line. What does it look like inside that? Comb CPP. When we get to that, oh, that's where set prime buff lived. But we don't want this right now. I don't know where process is. That's weird. Well, let's go and find it then. Get back, set buffer, mute, set damp. Maybe it's elsewhere entirely. So, class comb, inline, oh, inline float process. So this is inlined because it needs to run faster. So everywhere we have process, see big inline but crucial for speed, when we are doing Reverb or Rev model, one or the other, let's find out. Oh, no, process replace, so it's going to be Rev model. We keep going up and down in the hierarchy of calling things. See where it says this stuff? This is the stuff that was inline replaced. That's why I wasn't able to find it. I went to where comb stuff is defined, and I could not find that function because this is inlined. That means it's in the H file instead of the C file. And it says inline float comb process. Weirdly, you call it using this. So it's just one of the comb filters. They're all part of this class, so they all have this available. So process input L sweep means you do this. I'm trying to, oh, and there's some more under normalize. All of these are actually this. And under normalize is also a line of code that's bigger than that. So we've got apparently internal variables for all of these things. You can't see them. They're hidden in the maze of code. And what we're doing is apparently not only this buffer filter, whatever, this is going to be the delay line. But we also apparently have a low pass filter in here, I think. Yeah, there's a low pass filter in here too. Okay. And that lives inside each of these little things. But they're inline because it says crucial for speed. We're doing so many of those. This is inlined as well because this is a macro. It sort of, in the preprocessor, it expands outwards into this big pile of code. But when you have the big pile of code like I routinely have, it executes faster rather than calling other functions. So that stuff is being done this way. That's why I wasn't able to find it. And we're doing this many things for the comb filters in parallel. OutL gets all of this stuff added. We got input only and sweep. See, now I'm trying to figure, oh, so I do a lot of if flip, that's handy. It's sweeping up and down. So what must surely be happening is we've got a little bit of modulation on these. They are scooching back and forward within the delays, and that's going to make pitch alterations. So these are modulated reverbs. Not that you can see it with all this indirection, it hides it. I apologize, I'm not doing that much of, but you got to hear a little bit of a reverb. Before one, I am going to patch in some of my actual chamber-sized delay tails, and we can start hearing what that will sound like. But we were never going to finish this plugin today, so no reason not to dive into Freeverb and start talking through it. And again, so the guts of this are just managing this sweep factor, which is everything is all of these things are bending side to side at equal rates. Let's see what sweep actually does. First of all, where do you call it? Input L sweep. So sweep is the second parameter. It's probably going to be a completely different name. Let's find out. It's got to be indirect. I mean, it's got to be inline. Float shift. So instead, they changed the name again. I swear some of this is like programmer job security. It's being done like this on purpose just to confuse. But shift is the thing that was named something else elsewhere in the program and is like washing back and forth rather slowly. What does shift do? Filter stores output. It's a buffer position. Buffer equals index. Where do we update buff index? Oh, buff index is getting incremented somewhere. Ah, here's where. So this line of code both wraps it around again and also increments it each time. And I'll tell you why. Because each of these things are a separate statement. This is if. If gives you the answer to a question. If the answer is yes, then we do this. If the answer is no, then we don't. So if buff index is larger or equal to prime buff, we reset it to 0. How did it get larger? It had this stuck on it. Plus plus buff index means it gets 1 larger each time. Every time you look at that, you're referring to the value, but the value also gets bumped 1. So if it was 1, then looking at plus plus buff index, it is now 2. And then we use that to do the comparison and return the answer to the if statement. Prime buff is the end result. Ah, but you say, how do you know whether the buffer number is going to be larger or not, depending upon when you added it to it? Like, do you check and then add? In this case, no, you add and then check because it's on the front. But you could also check and then add, like this. This kind of sort of does the same thing, but it will lag behind, because if you do this one, you check to see whether it's the same as prime buff, and only after you've checked do you add. Hey, Camilio. And after you have, so your number is going to be 1 larger than the last time you looked in the if statement. And that is why these are at the beginning. plus plus buff index, but you can do either with any of these, like plus plus, minus minus. I don't think there's a times times, but that would be cool. I think it's ints only. So there is a little tiny statement that in fact was all squished together into an unreadable lump. And more of the funky indirection and trickiness that programmers get up to. We're going to step back to the safer and calmer worlds. Don't save any of this, thank you. Of K-chamber. And my stuff tends to look like this. We're not going to a separate place. No, we're updating all of these things right here. And it's a simple, this is the same as what they were doing with like combs. These AS are, AQL, those are combs. They're the same as what they had otherwise, but they're just a stack of, I got a little fancier by using these defined integers to set up some of this stuff so I can change it. And in fact, that's what we're going to do now. But this is all being spelled out in a long string right here where you can find it and see where it is. And here's process buffer lists. And here is a stack of band passes being instantiated. And you can see it's like this one, and now we do this one, and now we do this one. And we're not making it into a class or some kind of inline function to be blind to all of this kind of stuff, and then the computer will have to do anyway. Nope, we're spelling it right out long form. And here is the ensample frames where in Reverb we had to go through several stages of indirection to get to this point. And then we're doing all of this stuff, like if it was inline, well, nope, this is literally inline. You get to see what it all looks like. And this is how much space it takes up. Now let's start doing some of the things. Here's our output. This, well, I might want to take this from, this is the hybrid version. This is the big fast arcsine, which I think is going to be a little cleaner. Might want to keep that for the acoustic spaces, because when you go to the sine based one, like in density, that's how I got sort of my tube tone thing going on. But that's not necessarily descriptive of what real world acoustic spaces sound like. What I'm doing here is a little bit more like spiral. Spiral is a version of sine where the middle part, as it crosses over between sides, is artificially smoothed out. And what I'm doing here does that automatically. So we don't need to do it anymore. And we are going to comment this out. Because this was put in to make stuff work a little bit more like, have I done more work in console M recently? That's probably going to happen after the TG1234, but I've still got the Mackie that I was going to look into is literally sitting over there. One of my ideas was I wanted to get an 8-bus. That's more like what people actually want out of that world, but I have not yet done that. Let's see, early reflections engaged, so I'm going to want that. Then up here, we're going to be moving some stuff around, changing things. I want to get it to where I can load up one of the matrices so you can hear what it would end up sounding like. Kinda. A little bit more like. The rest of this stuff is just tuning factors. And here is another instance of curve. We're going to get rid of that. That was for doing a particular company's take on plate reverbs. That's not going to be the case for a proper chamber sounding thing. We're going to want to have it be more realistic sounding, so there's going to be that. And in fact, let's leave this off too. If I need to put it back, I will. There'll be something like that probably living. It'll probably be density living inside the pre-delay. And we're going to generate early reflections. Oh, and here's where. So yeah, we're not going to be using the all passes at all. In fact, I could delete this. I know I'm not going to be needing it. Because our acoustic spaces, much like Bracosti has also spoken of, he doesn't like using all passes and modulation and stuff on delays because he's like, well, the real world doesn't have that, so why should I? And instead he uses the householder matrices. But we are going to want to use a pre-delay, but we're not going to want to use it here. This pre-delay is going to have feedback associated with it. So we are going to want to put that up front. Take that out here. We'll find out pretty quickly whether it worked or not. We got our filter right at the beginning. That's also good because all of this interaction can cause aliasing when I'm doing the transfer function stuff. And we're going to tuck in our pre-delay after we've done a little bit of high passing and stuff. And we'll probably do the pre-delay post high pass, so things can combine together and maybe get a fuller sound running the high pass before everything else. The sequence of how these things work is always rather interesting. I'm going to want to move the regen. I might want to take some different thing and call that regen. Where is down rate? I don't think that works either. Let's leave that alone. It was working for now. I can worry about that next week when I'm not so distracted by things like Reverb. Got another 20 or so minutes to come up with something that you can hear that sounds like a chamber. And I'll tell you where I'm going to get that. Oh, that's release, not from there. I still need to take audio and run it to a online run stuff through analog tape service so that I can get back to 2-tape 7. Haven't got back to that quite yet. Yeah, it's in here. So we need to listen to some of these things. I'm going to cut them right out. And plug them right in where they belong. And that's going to be here. Don't know if this is going to be audible yet, but I'll fix it if it ain't. And We have pre-delays for KStudio B as well. It's a different size, so it's different dimensions. And here we have our 5x5s, ready to likewise be, oh, can I select please? Thank you. Boop. And either now or later, we're going to save that. And we're going to go through and listen to these things and then associate them with words. I'm going to be listening for what sounds the most like the chamber I'm trying to emulate. But if I can name the other one something, I will do that, because then I can use them for other things and in other places. There might be one that is perfectly fine, but I'm simply not getting what this particular chamber needs out of it. And I'll store it, because some of these took hours to generate, and I might be able to use them elsewhere. And this should build. And did. My little memory card. I'm going to move this over so that I can launch this better, but for now, let us just open Chamber Collapse once more, and we return to our plugin. That's what it's supposed to sound like, and that is not appropriate. Supposed to sound like this. Sounds like this. That's garbage. Do I have pre-delay? No, I don't. Well, let's mulch it out. Let's darken it. Let's stereoify it. We'll take Reso down so that we're not filtering it at all. I might need to go and generate more, because I'm not hearing it. Let's make damping be bigger and see whether we can get anywhere. Less mulch. Supposed to sound like that, but it sounds like this. So this one is not working at all. I might actually end up needing to generate more, which are larger spaces, because it feels to me as if this is far too small of a space. I'm not feeling it. It's not even close. So let's also experiment with some of the other options. Directly quit out of there. Because here's the one generated with that small of a set of delays. You heard the previous one was huge. And I can swap both of these out. Not that it's necessarily going to make that big of a difference. I don't think I'm using the early reflections. I can look into it and find out. Early volume is actually the pre-delay. So I'm doing that to set it up ahead of time. And early volume inside here, So we are able to add the early volume. So the pre-delay is only affecting early volume. If we were listening to only that, it would be a very quick little thing like you heard. Excuse me. Oh, maybe we need this in here. Build again, this time with this other one. And so if this is also garbage, I'm probably going to just swap in a randomly chosen tiny room just so that we can get into the vicinity, because I promised you'd hear something that was somewhere in the vicinity, which so far this is not. No low cut, full early reflections. Ah. See? Now that's not good, but we're beginning to get a bit of more of a sense of what's going on. I think part of it might be I'm not able to reach a high enough damping. That or so the resonances might be doing something here. I'm basically trying to open it up as widely as I can. Let's go and start listening to just the... So this is what we're playing with, trying to get it to be something. When we have resonance set this high, it's not doing anything. As we start to increase it, we can bring it in so that the tone quality is being changed. This is roughly in kilohertz. And it's spread about among different ones. And again, less damping, less decay. And pre-delay is going to be kind of subtle here because it's happening very, very quickly. That's more relevant for really ginormous rooms where I have a big space that is always very active, but I'd like to have some stuff happening instantly rather than waiting for the big long reverb to come in and come back. So pre-delay is for that. I might be able to get away with not using pre-delay with this. That'll make it a little more efficient. And while we're at it, we're doing big fast dark sine output stage. What if we put back in the distortion? Maybe we're just expanded a little bit too much. So rather than having curve be there, because I'm pretty sure I'm not going to want it. Here's our big fast sine channel stage. We're running the entire thing as a tiny version of console 0, which hasn't come out yet, inside this reverb. And you know what? I already know I'm going to want that delay thing there, but not necessarily the same as regen, so we're going to fuss with it. Where have I got regen? It's going to be in here somewhere rather than another file. At least I've got that going for me. Let's not care. Let's put it here. Oh, that can't be one word. We're going to call it steed regen because this is going to be our little tape delay thingy. And there we are. Now we have to make it be 0 on instantiation. That's not too hard to do. I had that up top, so I'll do this up top too. And now we can use it. And I do mean use. We're going to use. Let's steal the input pad for the purposes of doing this. Input pad equals 1 always. Now steed regen equals this. Now what we do, and do we have this defined as something that's actually a thing? I need to steal that from out of the an earlier one. So let's do that. That was a half-second delay on all of those plates, and so we might as well just take the same thing, and it'll be like, hey, you can do a half-second delay on the chamber too, but guess what? It is a tape echo that has regeneration. That'll be fun. AU should serve perfectly well. These use that the same way each time. This stuff is going to be the same, but I've got a ringer in here. And that ain't it, but this is. Const int pre-delay. So now we're going to go in and make all of these be consistent with this overall thing. Actually, hang on. In case it is useful, I'm going to write down the names, the numbers of, because these were the maximum delays of everything. I have got lost, help. Not that lost. Now we can start replacing this outright. And each of them is going to be our quarter second. Having done that, the rest of this stuff should automatically work. because it all gets built off of this. But I have to go and look at how I implemented it here, because it's going to match. This stuff is going to be the same. It's referring to these numbers like this in order to define how big of a buffer it is. So I don't need to change that in the final result, but I will need to find where it is applying that. And that would be this line of code here. Downright divided by, or times, early volume. Does that still look the same? It still looks the same to me. Is early volume? No, not quite. I have it at 0.5, not 1.0. So we're going to keep it at that. And let's see. I'm going to get some of this stuff done before I'm done with the stream for the day. Just 'cause. So let's see, here's our chamber. Here's our input filter. We should be doing this before this section. This is splitting it up into the all passes, or the matrix. So we need to move this again with curve. Don't want that there. That was for the plates. Ooh, but I could build that into it. Hang on. Oh. Hang on, we'll get there. I want this to be next to the place where it's getting used. Back in the day, my brother taught me that one. And I'm going to steal this and build it into the echo so that it gets more and more distorted each time around. And here we are beginning with early reflections, which may or may not even be relevant. But our filtering gets applied there. And yeah, everything does get applied here. Oh, don't do that. It thought I was doing a C++ thing and it indented. Where was my... Here. Steed regen, that's what I want. And like that, but on the right. This should at least make a sound. You should be able to hear what it does. So that is the regeneration, and the regeneration is generated by this. You might use a filter. There is a DC offset plugin, but it's not going to do the work of figuring out what the offset is for you. The DC voltage, it will actually apply DC offset, so you would need to be careful about how you went about using it. Don't just idly like plug it in and turn it on, but DC voltage is the simplest DC offset thing that you could have. Just be cautious using it. Blow your subwoofers up if you're not careful trying to use that. Let's build this and see if it builds. After it builds, let's build it and see if it works. As in, does anything. Back to our claps. Hey, I'm glad that you liked K-Plate D. Back to our plugin. Input pad is now pre-delay. Now we have a pre-delay. When we have a plate, we're not hearing it much. There we have the pre-delay. That's definitely not a full half second. And we have regeneration. In fact, we have far too much regeneration. I bet that's because of the distortion stage. Yeah, all these pre-delays are way too quick. We are going to see whether I was correct in making that one change. Maybe I wasn't. There's our input pad, there's our state regen. We'll build again and see whether we have anything. As is so often the case, I'm running a little bit over time, but whatever. This wasn't going to be done today, but I am enjoying getting something happening out of it, I guess. Okay, well that runs. If it runs here, it'll run at other sample rates and stuff too. That said, it does not sound any too... this is the raw output of it. We've got a certain amount of distortiness, but... not as much of the tone thing that I was thinking of. So I tell you what, we're going to do another little trick before I'm done. That would be, let's brazenly steal one of these filters. Let's steal filter D. And we're going to sneak it in here, which will probably mean moving output sample again. That's okay. That's fine. We need to have this up here now, because we're going to use it. And let's see. Oop. And likewise for this. That should make this function. Let's give it a try. Now we have a tape effect kind of thingy where it is getting very resonant indeed. One downside is that we're affecting the reverb space as well, far too much. Not that it's really working very well for us. So that's the raw sort of tape style output. And as we add the chamber quality into it, which I think the chamber is coming across far too small, that's going to require some work. But we can make it go a little darker. More or less resonant. Knowing that our band D is actually sitting right up on the front as the sort of tape regen thing. We're zeroing in on this. And so we can kind of manipulate it around like this. And as promised, let's hear what it sounds like to have a somewhat different end result. Don't need this anymore. Gonna want to go here. All of these are probably garbage because they do not sound anything like what I heard in the room. But we do have other possibilities. I'll just go through. By next week, I'll have other stuff generated that should be more suitable. It's probably still going to be fine for the early reflections, though. So early reflections are here. Again, it's calculated out to attempt to be like a 21 by 12 room, which would be about 18 milliseconds, and that turns out to be it's not coming across as very plausible to me. I'm not very satisfied with how that's working out. So let's hear what it sounds like with something else. And we want the 5x5 household matrices. How about Small Box of Rock? How's that sound? Because these are an increasing scale of sizes. And just to hear what it sounds like, because this is not optimized. Let's hear what this sounds like, and then I'll log off for the day. It's just possible that I might need to even dig more deeply into this, but for now, this should give us a distinctly less closet-like room sound, because that was far too small and closet-like, and some of these things clearly need a little bit of investigation. Now let's see what we got. Nope. But too much pre-delay. It's too bright, And it's probably a little bit too long, so maybe you're not as far off as I thought. But we can get this going. And start looking at what we're doing. With our resonances. One thing I'm noticing is that the echo density is still heavier than I'm getting out of this natively. So that's interesting. Oh, cool. And it does sound kind of weirdly chamber-like a room-like, though. Weird. Feedback. That's the factor of the pre-delay. So this is going to obviously take a bunch more work. However, oh, I can think of something to do at the last minute. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. So there is our output of everything, and that is within various filters and things. This could probably also be inside that. May or may not even be using the early reflections at all. I think I've got the control for them in there. I think I've got it set to nothing at the moment. And we do actually, we could throw in curve and see if that is helping us with regard to this. There it is. And then we had this, but that was making things quieter. So let's take that back out and see what we got. And now that we've listened to this a little bit, then I will shut down for the day. I can't spend too many hours doing this kind of stuff or I'll just burn myself out. Did we just add that? I think we did. Find out. And so this is obviously going to have to try some more algorithms on this to get it into a place where that'll work. Ooh, this has a profound effect. Oh, this is the input and output filters. Yeah, so dialing this in suitably might help. I can't really get the pre-delay going under these circumstances because the reference I have has no pre-delay. But what I can do is hear these distinct differences. And yeah, I'm going to have to look a lot harder into what impulse to use, what the householder matrix needs to be, because I am like a mile away. But I'm making noises, so there's that. It's handy to have a good reference for stuff where I can get bits of it working, and with a bit of luck I can continue to get more of it working as I get the householder matrices into a place that'll work for a small room like that, because the stuff that I had been trying is absolutely not. I mean, I say that, I could of course do a last minute swap because I still have some of that stuff sitting there ready to go. The problems I was running into were not so much in the early reflections as in the post. Hey, Fokumas. And what I had to work with was along the lines of this. And none of these were, well, I only tried 2 of them. To the best of my knowledge, none of these were working. We will see. And if those don't work, I can spend some more. I got a couple of weeks before trying to put this anywhere. And I can try to get this into a zone where it is something. But the problem I was running into I'm trying to get that sound. And I'm getting that. So one of the things is that damping is not nearly, it's not going to high enough numbers. And there are things I can do to fool with that. Because damping is not going to shift. It's going to sit there being the same thing each time. And the only damping change in the final result is going to be on that tape delay effect. So if we bump that up, I should be able to get the room reverb to extend outwards, and then we can hear what that sounds like. I need to be able to get it to sustain. Only then can I hear whether it's in the zone or not, because it's pretty much just falling away far too fast. About ready to log off, honestly I am. Get into this jam sometimes when things go wrong and it doesn't work out the way I wanted. So firstly, you have to settle down. You could settle down. And we're still not giving permanent sustain. What if I do this? Stereo flips has a huge effect on this one. So we need more damping, even more damping, as in larger possible range. Oh, let me push it even harder. I bet that can do that. If I can't, we'll find out real quick. So I'm basically trying to make it expand outwards in the way that the real one does, but without enough sustain. See what we got. So for each of these, I have all these options. Because this is such a intense effect. And this. With little short impulses like this, if we mulch it out, it becomes far too intense. And it sounds like a bell rather than a room, which is odd. And back to relating it to a real one. Oh. Yuck. But that is a lot closer than I started as far as getting one of those initial attempts to act like the bloom of the actual room. So I gotta start experimenting with all of those various renders, all those options, and I'm gonna need to try all of them on each stereo flip, because like I said, the stereo flips is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Actually, more like 5. And each of the 4 options that I made is going to have each of those variations, and with like one of them will sound like our beloved real world sound. And I'm going to call that a day. Been a bit of a long day. It's usually easier when stuff goes well rather than when it behaves really poorly. But, you know, doing it from scratch, you hear all of those rough spaces as it goes through these phases that are just not working. And I've got certain things going on, like I've got the start to the Steed system in a simplified and hopefully effective way. So, on that note, I will bid you good day, and next week should be the crazy Loudinator Airwindows Huge, because somebody was asking about that. And then next Monday I'll get back to, I'll have put maybe a little bit more work into getting this together, and we can see whether we can take it the rest of the way. So I'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.